Okay, so in part two, we're talking about continuing our discussion of post-feminist issues, and we're looking at bodywork and wellness culture now. So I suppose, like, in a way, wellness seems to be a thing that you would think is like kind of good in a way, like, you know, looking after yourself, being happy, reading the right stuff, exercising. And obviously from a public health point of view, it is, if that's what wellness was.
Yeah.
But the wellness has become something else. So we're going to kind of relate this, kind of have a critique through the lens of the stuff we've been talking about, relating back to bodywork and that kind of post-feminist stuff. So what are some of the key things we're relating to here?
So yeah, this looks back to the broader socio and cultural meanings of bodywork, or why particular bodies are valued, and as complete socio-cultural historical phenomena. Really, there's nothing intrinsic at all here. It's really from this perspective, it's about looking at what all those meanings are instead of taking them for granted. So a lot of the gendered norms that were implicated in bodywork, that like some of the guys in the study said, oh, a man should be a man. Like, what does that mean? And they would always mean muscularity, and then strength, taking care of other people, but being stoic and non-emotional, all those kinds of very quite well known.
So the hegemonic masculine ideals, the hero, the star, the warrior.
Yeah, exactly. That's what a man is, and that's what he should be. As this completely self-repeating and self-fulfilling circle. Importantly, the heterosexual matrix of desire, which is what Judith Butler says sort of underpins traditional gender relations. They're really important for understanding the kinds of gendered relations and gendered performances that lots of the participants in my studies have spoken about as well. Informing normative femininity as well, which we've already talked about quite a bit in previous weeks and before, but also health discourses are really important for ideal bodies, which is really what bodywork is about. Bodywork is generally about how to improve the body, how to make it hopefully conform or shape it to a way that was going to be coded as ideal, and ideal would always mean from a gendered perspective and also from a health, because people like to think that they can read health onto bodies through gendered norms, right? Like of slenderness. They would assume if a woman is slender that she's healthy, which is obviously completely not the case. And same for men, they'd be like, oh, muscles are healthy on a man, it means he's healthy. But really these are just completely coded, gendered, social, cultural norms.
Steroids aren't healthy.
No, steroids aren't healthy, and starving yourself isn't healthy. Eating what you want to eat, being able to, do particular things that you want to do is healthy. The Maintenance Phase podcast is really good for a much deeper dive into these things. But
what's interesting about this too is like the way that kind of gratification is delayed all the time. Like, so anything that's instant seems to be like immoral, if you're just kind of eating for pleasure, well, no, you need to be more disciplined than that. So there's a kind of very much a kind of almost like a traditional kind of spirit of capitalism thing going on here in some of this stuff as well.
Really, really conservative, traditional beliefs and morals are packaged into this, and they've been subsumed or very useful for neoliberal capitalism because they become the moralized capacities of not just what you do, but the kind of person you are. You show you the kind of person you are through the body.
And so what's interesting about this, like obviously taking care of yourself seems like a good idea, right? But what it becomes in the wellness industry, when it's kind of capitalized upon, taking care of yourself means being a good consumer, a good worker, and being like good looking in kind of these normative ways that doesn't necessarily map onto health.
No, absolutely not. But they're all sort of collapsed in, and then they're really hard to pull apart and be like, oh, hang on, that's over there, that's over here. They're not just one and the same.
And so there's been kind of sociology of wellness developing over the past decade. Some couple of really great books about them. So tell us a little bit about that critique.
Bright Sided by Barbara Ehrenreich is a really great book. That's the last reference there. So they talk about, I guess, the historical dimensions of how, you know, moralized aspects of identity or subjecthood get, you know, combined with ideas around well-being. So this connects a lot, even though McRobbie doesn't talk about wellness and well-being, the same kind of critiques of post-feminism or of the kind of broader capitalist, you know, moment, and around what, you know, what good subjecthood is. Like, and all of this matters because ultimately through the kinds of ideas going on in these theories, they're all mapping back to say, okay, what is a good person? Who is a good citizen? What people are rewarded and held up as being the examples that we all should follow? And then when they analyze what those examples are, they'll come back to these kind of, you know, moralized appearances that code on to health, which mean that you're not then a drain on the state. Often it maps onto kind of welfare, or like, you know, welfare critiques, and also, like you were saying before, being a good consumer, being a economically functional citizen, as Ehrenreich says. So these are being, you know, these are deeply ideological things, really. Wellness, well-being can also, if it's connected to neoliberal, very individualized norms, deeply ideological projects around capitalism and neoliberalism.
And actually really bloody expensive.
Yeah, well, exactly. That's the thing. It continues to punish the poor, usually, will completely reinforce rather than look at current forms of inequality.
So, this kind of the perfect leitmotif that Robbie talks about. Yeah.
So this links with, you know, I spoke already a lot about contemporary femininity and conditions of post-feminism. So the perfect, I guess, is a way of connecting, the wellness industry ideals and femininity ideals are of the perfect, are the, you know, that's the branding for the wellness industry, essentially. So that's the thing. It all connects through the body, these discourses, as well as the gendered ones, to have a very particular, that we all understand, we can, these coded, look good, feel good kind of logics. So the way to feel good is to do body work, because then you look good and then you feel good. It's just sort of this weird cycle, self-fulfilling prophecy that doesn't really work, but it's just sort of the mantra that's been adopted and is just so easily recognizable and understood. It's a shorthand for many things. But it really, I guess, the main way I look at it and the purpose of it is to communicate the significance of these, of body ideals, of body practices, as fulfilling gendered and wellness kind of ideals, which are very, very valuable for neoliberal capitalism, very effective modes of selling things.
No, I suppose we'll talk in detail in part 3 about selfies and kind of how they kind of relate to, you know, influencers and stuff like that. But like, just how much time and money it takes to kind of present the, you know, the look online or whatever, and the staging that goes into that, and how kind of often fake the perfect is.
Absolutely.
It's kind of interesting in terms of it's almost the perfect should be called the impossible or something, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so let's look at some of your research respondents here. So this is a different project. Oh, this is combining some projects, isn't it? Some different.
I think this is all the same. This is the same project from the last one, which was on everyday embodiment. So they're different participants, I think. So they would talk about the kinds of ideal. I would often ask them about what ideal bodies you see around, or where do you get these gendered ideals about how women should look? Where do you get them from? And that often talk obviously about social media, and they would find it often a really constraining space. I would often sort of ask, what do you post on social media? Try to broaden it out, and they're like, oh, I can't really post pictures of myself or my food. People won't understand it. They'll be like, why are you posting this? You don't look like these women, so like you can't post. And they'd say they'd often see people who do post more body positive stuff, or when I was doing this study, that was sort of that wasn't a really widespread kind of form of social media. But they'd be like, oh, it's great they can post that, but I couldn't do that. That's just not, that's an effective constraint, right? You can't even participate in social media, they were saying. Whereas that's not the common discourse, is that, women are always, it's for everyone, and, but it was, the gendered aspects of it and the wellness appearance that codes particular body shapes, right, of thinness with health would mean that someone's body, like Laura was saying, her body would be illegible in that space.
Yeah, it's interesting in that sense, like, even if you're doing the body work to try and look like that, she's kind of saying that if you post a smoothie, I'm trying to, obviously, I'm having the smoothie, doing the exercise to be like that, but you can't really post it unless you do already look like that.
Yeah, exactly.
The legitimacy around it is already being like that.
Yeah.
The wellness lifestyle is kind of, it's almost like separate to it in a way. Like the body's here, the wellness stuff is there.
Well, because
it's separate, but
Well, because it's not about the process, it's about the image. It is really the image and the appearance of it is everything. Such that the actual, the physical practices or all of the details kind of aren't understandable.
And the first quote here is kind of like the impossible, right? Like the perfect, like you're never going to look like that anyway.
Yeah. And and I guess the work of, she's trying to do the confidence thing here, like decide, I know it's not healthy for me to look at those, so I try not to. I just need to focus on myself. I'm never going to look like her, it's okay. But and then it was I thought I knew what she was saying, and then she's like, but I can't post photos, and that's fine. I thought she was going to be like, but I can, but it was just like, no, I can't.
No. So it relates to kind of notions of happiness, satisfaction, and all this kind of thing. The promise of the perfect life. So this notion of Fitspo.
So these kinds of images, they do more than just sort of portray an image of health or sort of an ideal or a branding type of thing. For some people, they see these as like a total fulfilled, like actual living thing.
So they interpret the kind of perfect image as equaling the perfect life. And interpret that as that.
Exactly. Instead of looking
and actually think those people are more happier.
Exactly.
Even though it doesn't look like a very happy life.
No, but that's the thing. So it just creates this, I guess, this flattening of where images communicate, not just a kind of unreality or not just a perfect or unattainable, but actually communicating something attainable for this particular participant. And she also, you'll see a picture that she thinks is like a normal kind of girl in the next one. And this is who she was talking about. Like, I don't follow like really skinny people or models. I just follow like relatable content like this person. And I was like, oh, okay. Okay. As being a normal, I mean, that's the thing. If this is like a normal kind of everyday femininity, then that's a pretty, like, that has gone to quite a, extreme of
the window of normal shifted.
The baseline is. And this is what Monica and Laura in the earlier slides were talking about, this unattainable, where their bodies are not legible. They're very, very normal, everyday kind of beautiful bodies of young women. But then if this is the baseline, then it's like, okay, well, it's not legible. And she also said that she could these bodies had sort of affect again in terms of what they communicated. So she's talking about how the aspiration, I guess, built into this perfection communicated to her, as Penny, that if you look like this, if you're fit, healthy physically, then she suspects that these people, these influencers, are happier, feel more love, that they have these richer, expansive sorts of capacities as, like, I don't know, some kind of transcendent human. It was really, I thought it was really fantastic the way she described it, because she really nailed it, I think, for the significance of the kind of effective power that bodies like this communicate.
Yeah. Yeah. And even though we know they don't, right? So those people aren't any happier than the general population.
No,
so,
but
yeah. So they kind of got it all.
Yeah, like, wow, look at that. And that's why these bodies, and it's why it's so effective as for advertising, and why influencers are, sort of the ideal brand, the ideal ways that for neoliberal capitalism, absolutely crucial for creating relatable, so-called attainable, achievable content, while still, operating or sort of gesturing to this elsewhere, this other place where if you buy these things and you adopt this lifestyle and this diet and these, leggings, whatever, that these things are attainable and possible. So it's really the kind of capitalist par excellence figure.
And I think from the more kind of socio-economic side of things as well, and labour markets and all that kind of stuff, this is all happening at a time where young people, struggle to get full-time work, casualise labour, have less and less money to spend on anything. It becomes even more unattainable, because of all those kind of costs. And this kind of relates, I suppose, back to some of those ugly feelings we were talking about in the first part.
Yeah, absolutely. And cultivating all of those different lists of personal capacities, right? A completely individualized view of the self that is always focusing away from the constraints, always focusing away from structural inequalities, all of the material conditions that would create that kind of life that's been completely unrealistic and unattainable for 99.9% of people.
That's right, particularly if you've got a job. So people are kind of being drained and annoyed.
Exactly. So Steph is surrounded by work. She works at a vegan cafe. Her mum's a real fitness freak, into clean eating. Everyone at work they're all hardcore vegans, into nutrition, that kind of broader wellness environment. She said it really annoys me. So Steph was the one in the previous section who was side on in the mirror, looking, praising herself. So aware of it all the time, but was really trying to push it back, and to be like, I've studied feminism. I'm really trying to, I know this is a problem. There's something not right about this.
And essentially too, it's taking over social space, because it's all they were talking about. She's saying, I just don't want to talk about this stuff all the time. I want to have relations that are outside the constraints of our bodies. Yeah,
exactly. And she tried to position herself as the one who would disrupt, or, try to recenter that talk around something else, or try to deliberately speak positively about her body, just to show that it was possible, even though she didn't always feel that way.
So we're kind of gesturing here towards another kind of concept around cruel optimism. And then the Valant kind of defines cruel optimism as pursuing something that's to kind of be the detriment of your own flourishing.
Pursuing something that actively
seems to sum up the wellness industry in many ways.
I think it's a really great concept for it, because it's sort of, again, I guess at the centre of so much of this work through McRobbie and through Valant and others is this sort of central paradox. There's something essential to the ways that we're, expected to live at the moment, or encouraged to live, that is detrimental to our flourishing. Even though flourishing is it's another way of saying it is constraining our capacities to live in a way that is already very constrained. So that kind of the tensions in those feelings of oh, wow, look at that, of the kind of that's a feminine luminosity right there, the last examples. And sort of really rubs up against, in a very jarring way, that kind of unrelenting irritation of body image concerns or ugly feelings that can sort of just pursue people relentlessly. And the difficulty, I guess, of inhabiting or having to inhabit a space of social media as just to talk about this in the next section, a really important aspect of young people's socialities, right? Digital culture is not going anywhere. It's a really important way that young people relate to each other and create social meanings, but it comes with all of these kind of cruel optimisms that are built in
Yep.
to the technology, but not just built into the technology, is reflective of the social and cultural moment that we're in already.
Yeah.
You know.
Okay, and we'll look at that in more detail in the next part.